In a peaceful village surrounded by golden fields and whispering winds, there lived a farmer whose heart was as gentle as the morning sun. He wasn't wealthy, nor did he possess great land or luxurious things, yet his life glowed with simplicity and hard work. Each day before dawn, when the world was still wrapped in silence and the mist rested over the soil, the farmer began his long daily journey to the distant well. He would balance a wooden stick across his shoulders, a simple, sturdy piece of wood smoothed by years of use, and on each end hung a clay pot. One pot was flawless, shining with smooth curves and a polished surface that reflected the rising sunlight. The other pot, however, bore a visible crack along its side, a small but stubborn flaw that made it imperfect. Every morning, the farmer filled both pots to the brim with fresh, cool water. He would then begin his walk home, the sun rising behind him and birds beginning their morning songs. As he moved, the cracked pot leaked steadily, drop by drop, a quiet trail marking its weakness. By the time they reached home, half its water was gone. The perfect pot took pride in its performance. It was proud that it never wasted a single drop, proud of its strength and beauty. But pride can sometimes be cruel. Every day it mocked the cracked pot in a soft, superior voice. "Look at you," it would whisper, the sunlight glinting off its perfect surface. "You can't even do the simple task we're made for. Half of your water is always gone before we reach home. You are nothing but a burden." The cracked pot never replied. It stayed silent, even though inside its fragile heart was breaking. Every word from the perfect pot felt like a thorn. Every day, it watched its water drip away and wondered why it even existed. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The perfect pot's arrogance grew, and the cracked pot's sadness deepened. At first, the cracked pot believed it could endure, that maybe silence was strength. But over time, the constant ridicule carved deeper cracks inside, not on its surface, but in its spirit. The cracked pot began to see itself as worthless. It started to dread the mornings when the farmer would lift it onto his shoulders. It hated seeing the clear blue sky, hated hearing the laughter of birds, hated the reflection of its broken side in the water. Shame became its constant companion. One morning, unable to hold back its emotions any longer, the little pot began to tremble as the farmer filled it with water. Tears rolled down its clay surface, mixing with the droplets of the well. The farmer noticed but said nothing, only smiled gently. As they walked back, the cracked pot's sadness grew heavier. Halfway home, its trembling voice broke the silence. "I'm so sorry," it whispered. The farmer stopped mid-step, surprised. "Sorry? Why are you sorry, my little friend?" "Because I'm broken," the pot said, voice quivering. "Because every day you work so hard, and every day I waste your effort. Half of my water is gone before we even reach home. I'm not like the other pot. I'm weak. I'm useless. I failed you." The farmer placed the stick gently on the ground and knelt beside the pot. His eyes were filled with kindness, the kind that listens before it speaks. "Oh, my dear one," he said softly, "you don't need to apologize for being who you are. Tomorrow I will show you something, and after that, you will never feel useless again." The cracked pot didn't understand, but it trusted the warmth in the farmer's voice. For the first time in a long while, it felt a faint flicker of hope. The farmer lifted his burden again, and they continued the journey home in silence, the sun setting softly behind them, as if even the heavens were listening. That night, the cracked pot couldn't sleep. The moonlight touched its uneven surface, and for the first time it wondered, could there really be something beautiful about being broken? The next morning, the world awoke to a golden sunrise that painted the sky with gentle hues of pink and orange. The farmer set out as usual, carrying his 2 clay pots along the dusty village path. Birds fluttered overhead, and the scent of moist earth rose from the ground after a light dawn mist. But today was different. Today, the farmer had promised to show the cracked pot something that would change its view of itself forever. As they walked toward the well, the cracked pot felt nervous, yet curious. It wondered what the farmer meant. Could there truly be anything to see? It still carried the shame of its flaw, the crack that had made its existence miserable. They reached the well, and as always, the farmer filled both pots with water. The cracked pot sighed, already dreading the inevitable. The dripping, the loss, the quiet humiliation. The farmer began walking back, his bare feet making soft impressions in the dust. But this time, he said gently, "Today, my little friend, look carefully at the path we take." At first, the cracked pot didn't understand. It looked down and saw only the dirt road. But as they moved further, a sight unfolded before its eyes that made it gasp softly. Along its side of the path, the side where its water always leaked, bloomed a line of wildflowers. Bright red, cheerful yellow, soft pink, and delicate blue petals danced in the morning breeze. The cracked pot could hardly believe it. The flowers swayed like a living rainbow, glistening with dew. The farmer smiled as he noticed the pot's quiet amazement. "Beautiful, aren't they?" he said. The cracked pot nodded in silence. For the first time in many days, it forgot its sadness. The sight of those flowers filled it with wonder. As they walked, it saw how the trail of blooms stretched all the way to the horizon, a living tapestry of color and life. But when they finally reached home, the pot once again noticed that half its water was gone. The joy it had felt quickly faded into guilt. "I still failed you," it whispered. "Even after seeing those flowers, I still couldn't bring you a full pot of water." The farmer placed both pots on the ground and smiled kindly. "No, my friend," he said softly, "you didn't fail me. You gave life to something more beautiful than I could ever have done alone." The cracked pot blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Didn't you notice?" the farmer continued. "The flowers grow only on your side of the path, not on the other pot's side. I've always known about your crack. That's why, many months ago, I planted flower seeds along your path. Every day, as we walked back from the well, your water nurtured them. Without you, this road would be dry and barren. But because of your flaw, it is now filled with color and life." The cracked pot fell silent. Its tears returned. But these were not tears of sadness. They were warm, trembling tears of realization. For so long, it had seen only weakness in itself. Yet now it understood that its imperfection had a purpose. The farmer touched the pot gently. "You see, my little friend, the things that make you feel broken can sometimes make the world more beautiful. You just have to see yourself from a different light." And with that, the cracked pot began to shine, not on its surface, but from within. As the cracked pot listened to the farmer's words, something inside it began to shift. The same crack that had once been a mark of shame suddenly felt different. Not ugly, not flawed, but meaningful. It looked back toward the winding road they had walked, now glowing in the golden sunlight. The flowers danced in soft motion, like a living celebration whispering to the breeze, "You did this." The cracked pot tried to find words, but none came. Its heart was overwhelmed with a strange blend of disbelief and gratitude. The farmer watched it quietly, his smile patient and kind, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment, the moment when understanding blooms. "Every drop you lost," the farmer continued softly, "was not wasted. It gave life. While the perfect pot carried every drop carefully home, your drops nurtured these flowers. That's the magic of life. Sometimes what we think is loss becomes someone else's gain. Sometimes what breaks us is what makes the world around us bloom." The cracked pot trembled again, not out of sadness, but from the deep emotion swelling within it. "I never knew," it whispered, voice barely audible. "You were never meant to," the farmer said, placing his rough, work-worn hand gently on the pot's rim. "You simply had to be yourself. That was enough." "It always was," the words echoed inside the cracked pot's heart. "Be yourself." For the first time, those words didn't sound like a consolation. They sounded like truth. It thought back to all the mornings it had hated its reflection, to the countless times it wished it were perfect, smooth, and whole. But now, those same imperfections looked almost beautiful in the sunlight. Each tiny scar a story of persistence. Each line a path of water that had brought life to the world. The farmer lifted his stick again, balancing the two pots across his shoulders. "Come," he said warmly. "Let's go again tomorrow. The flowers still need you." As they walked into the setting sun, the cracked pot felt lighter. For once, it didn't notice the dripping water. It noticed how the sunlight refracted through each drop, scattering little rainbows on the ground. Every drop had a purpose. Every leak was a gift. That night, the cracked pot couldn't sleep again, but this time it wasn't because of sorrow. It was wonder. It thought of how easily it had believed the perfect pot's cruel words, how it had allowed others' judgments to define its worth, how it had never realized that flaws could be blessings. Meanwhile, the farmer sat by the window of his small cottage, watching the moonlight touch the fields. He had seen so many people in his life break under the weight of comparison, always wishing to be like someone else. But he had also learned something that the world often forgets. Perfection doesn't create meaning. Imperfection does. The broken bring beauty. The wounded bring wisdom. The imperfect bring life. The cracked pot was no longer the same. It might still have the same physical crack, but in its spirit it was whole. The next morning, when the farmer lifted the stick and began his walk, the cracked pot no longer felt like a burden. It felt proud. Proud to give, proud to create, proud to simply be. When they reached the well again, the perfect pot noticed something different. The cracked pot looked peaceful, content, even joyful. The perfect pot frowned slightly. What changed? It asked coldly. You're still cracked, you still leak. What's there to smile about? The cracked pot looked at the flowers that lined the path and said softly, everything. The perfect pot followed its gaze, and for the first time noticed the trail of blossoms it had ignored for months. It realized the flowers bloomed only on one side, the cracked pot's side. For the first time it too went quiet, humbled by the truth it had never seen. Sometimes perfection blinds. Imperfection opens the eyes, and from that day onward, the perfect pot never mocked again. That evening, the farmer gathered a few villagers near the well. He often shared little stories at sunset, stories filled with wisdom from his humble life. The children loved listening, and even the elders respected his gentle words. As the cracked and perfect pots rested beside him, gleaming in the soft orange light, the farmer began to speak. Do you see these two pots? He asked. The crowd nodded. For years they have walked with me every morning to fetch water. One is flawless, the other has a crack, and yet both serve their purpose in their own unique way. The children leaned closer, curious. But farmer, one of them asked, isn't the cracked one weaker? The farmer smiled. That's what we often think. We believe perfection means strength, but strength isn't always about holding everything together. Sometimes it's about what we give away. He pointed to the path lined with flowers. The cracked pot lost water every day, but in losing it gave. Created beauty where there was none. That's a reminder for all of us. What you see as your weakness might be the very reason someone else smiles. The villagers looked at the flowers, and a hush fell over the group. Some smiled softly. Some lowered their heads, lost in thought. Many among them carried their own invisible cracks, failures, regrets, mistakes, things they had hidden or felt ashamed of. But now those flaws seemed different, almost sacred. The farmer continued, we live in a world that celebrates perfection. Perfect looks, perfect success, perfect lives. But perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. The truth is, nobody is perfect. We all have our cracks, and that's what makes us human. He looked up at the sky where the first stars began to appear. When light passes through a flawless glass, it stays straight. But when it passes through cracks, it scatters. It creates patterns, reflections, colors. That's what our flaws do. They let the light out. The villagers listened in silence. The cracked pot, sitting nearby, glowed faintly in the fading sun. For the first time, it didn't hide. It didn't wish to be perfect. It simply existed, proud of its journey. The farmer ended softly. Don't curse your imperfections. Don't hide your scars. They are proof that you've lived, that you've given, that you've grown. Just like this little pot, you can bring beauty into the world even when you feel broken. The cracked pot felt tears forming again, but they were warm, healing tears. It looked at the farmer and whispered quietly, Thank you. The farmer smiled. Don't thank me, he said. Thank yourself for being exactly who you are. The villagers went home that night carrying a silent lesson, a truth they would remember every time they walked that flower-lined road. Years passed. The flowers continued to bloom along the path, bright and strong, nourished by the cracked pot's daily journey. The farmer grew older, his hair turning silver, his steps slower, but his heart never changed. Every morning, he still carried his two pots to the well, a ritual of love, patience, and gratitude. The cracked pot had become part of his life's story, not as a symbol of weakness, but of wisdom. Children in the village often ran beside him, touching the pot and smiling. "This is the pot that makes flowers grow," they would say. And the cracked pot, though made of clay, felt something deeper than joy. It felt purpose. Sometimes at night, under the starlit sky, it would remember the days of self-doubt, the times it hated itself, the moments it believed the perfect pot's cruel words. But those memories no longer hurt. They were lessons carved into its heart. It realized something profound. Every human being is a vessel, carrying both strength and weakness, beauty and flaw. Some hold their water perfectly. Others spill a little along the way. But in those spills, in those leaks, life often grows. The cracked pot became a quiet teacher for all who saw it. People began to see their own reflections in its story. The young woman who feared her scars, the old man who regretted lost years, the child who felt too small to matter. They all saw themselves in that simple piece of clay, and so the pot's story spread, whispered from village to village, retold by travelers, reshaped by poets, remembered by hearts that needed healing. In time, the perfect pot grew dull and forgotten, but the cracked pot lived on as a symbol of truth, that our cracks do not diminish our worth. They reveal it. One morning, as the old farmer made his final journey to the well, he placed a gentle hand on the cracked pot and said, "You've taught me more than I ever taught you." The cracked pot shimmered in the sunlight, and a final drop of water fell from its side. Not a leak this time, but a blessing. The road ahead was still lined with flowers, swaying softly in the breeze, each one a living testimony that even broken things can create beauty if they keep going. Final message: in this world, we often compare ourselves to others, wishing we were stronger, prettier, smarter, or more perfect. But the truth is, perfection is not the goal. Growth is, meaning is. Kindness is like the cracked pot. You may not hold everything together, but maybe you're watering someone's soul without realizing it. Maybe your story, your pain, your flaw is giving life to someone else's dream. So never look down on yourself. Never believe you are less. Your cracks are not your curses. They are the paths where your light escapes. Nobody is perfect. And that's what makes every one of us beautifully human.